We are recording this, so you can share with others. It will take a couple days, maybe even a week before it'll show up on the website. But okay. Okay, welcome everyone. A little history, first of all, on how this three-week series started. The Saturday at 9 book group read the book Power Worshippers, and it'll be on your resource list that we'll be passing out at the end. It was a very disturbing book, and it was talking about the organizational history of Christian nationalism that the far right is using right now to promote Christian nationalism. Some of us from that group decided it was so disturbing that we decided we were going to talk to the pastors. It was John McLeod, Jerry Hoffman, Don Tastet, and myself, Grace G. We talked with the pastors, all three of them together. As well, two of them are pastors, and then there's Deacon Kyle. And they were equally very disturbed. They've been aware of it for a couple years. Our bishop has been very involved with getting the word out. And they were encouraging us to have a discussion. So that's how it happened. And also, if you were not here on 4th of July weekend, Pastor Ben did a very good talk about Christian nationalism. It was a very soft touch on the subject, but he talked about patriotism versus being a Christian. So you can find that, of course, in the archived sermons. So there's some of the things we're seeking to do is to educate people on what it is, increase the awareness of the issue. Hear from the bishop. We called the bishop's office, and she almost right away say, I want to talk to the group, whoever you can get together. She has a statement that she's made since 2019 that I was not aware of. So she's going to be available next week online and Zoom. Readily said yes. She's very concerned about it. And that's the bishop for the ELC Lutheran Church. And then the very last session will be coming together to talk about how to address some of the issues, what we can do as persons, as we can do as a church, what we can do out in our community. And that will be a lot of from what you've heard. You'll get some ideas. I think the bishop will give us some ideas. And she's trying to give help to the pastors as well, because it's a very difficult topic. So you have sign-up sheets on the tables. We'd like to have those because we will use that to communicate with you all the handouts if you didn't get one, for example. Those of you that registered you should have gotten an email from Kyle yesterday with the emails. So, but that's what the importance of the sign-up sheet. If for some reason, I'm going to make some copies when I'm done talking, because a lot of the program is going to be video clips and breakout sessions to discuss things. So to start, I want to introduce a topic, a statement. There's an organization called Christians Against Christian Nationalism, and I'm going to read that, and you have copies if you want to follow along. So it's just going to be a read to start with, and we'll get started with the video. It's called Christians Against Christian Nationalism. As Christians, our faith teaches us everyone is created in God's image and commands us to love one another. As Americans, we value our system of government and the good that can be accomplished in our constitutional democracy. Today, we are concerned about a persistent threat to both our religious communities and our democracy, Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism seeks to merge Christian and American identities, distorting both the Christian faith and America's constitutional democracy. Christian nationalism demands Christians be privileged by the state and implies that to be a good American, one must be Christian. It often overlaps with and provides cover for white supremacy and racial subjugation. We reject this damaging political ideology and invite our Christian brothers and sisters to join us in opposing this threat to our faith and to our nation. As Christians, we are bound to Christ, not by citizenship, but by faith. And we believe that, and there's several bullets here, people of all faiths and none have the right and responsibility to engage constructively in the public square. Patriotism does not require us to minimize our religious convictions. One's religious affiliation or lack thereof should be irrelevant to one's standing in the civic community. Government should not prefer one religion over another or religion over non-religion. Religious instruction is best left to our houses of worship, other religious institutions, and families. America's historic commitment to religious pluralism enables faith communities to live in civil harmony with one another without sacrificing our theological convictions. Conflating religious authority with political authority is idolatrous and often leads to oppression of minority and other marginalized groups, as well as the spiritual impoverishment of religion. We must stand up to and speak out against Christian nationalism, especially when it inspires acts of violence and intimidation, including vandalism, bomb threats, arson, hate crimes, and attacks on houses of worship against religious communities at home and abroad. Whether we worship at a church, a mosque, a synagogue, or a temple, America has no second-class faiths. We are equal under the U.S. Constitution. As Christians, we must speak in one voice, condemning Christian nationalism as a distortion of the gospel of Jesus and a threat to American democracy. Sorry, I need a table. Okay. We're going to start watching a video now, and I want to explain what the setup for this is. It was in 2022. It was a panel that was held at Georgetown University. The moderator that you will see at the beginning is Jim Wallace, and he's an American theologian, a writer, a teacher, and a political activist. The panel members you will see in the order that they first speak is Reverend Michael Curry. He married Meghan and Harry, by the way. He's the bishop of the Episcopal Church. Amanda Tyler. She is an executive director of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, and she's one of the founders of Christians Against Christian Nationalism. And the third person is Samuel L. Perry. He's an assistant professor of sociology and religious studies at the University of Oklahoma, and he's the author of several books on Christian nationalism. So we're going to start the video. There will be 3 breakout times. Those of you that are on Zoom will get a breakout session room assigned to you. Those of you in the room will do it by table. So we're ready to go.
But first, we have a land acknowledgement statement. This is from the St. Paul-based Native Governance Center. Makoche, Minnesota, is the homeland of the Dakota people. Dakota have lived here for many thousands of years. Anishinaabe people reside here too and reach their current homelands following the Magizi shell to the food that grows on water, manuman, or wild rice. Indigenous people from other Native nations also reside in Minnesota and have made innumerable contributions to our region. Indigenous people are not relics of the past. They are still here. They continue to demonstrate their talents and gifts amidst the backdrop of ongoing colonialism and oppression. They are worth celebrating. Land acknowledgement is only one small part of supporting Indigenous communities. We hope this land acknowledgement statement will inspire us to stand with them in solidarity with Native nations. Solidarity can look like donating time and money to Indigenous-led organizations, amplifying the voices of Indigenous people, leading grassroots change movements, and returning land. And not coincidentally, tomorrow is Indigenous Monday. I think we are ready for the video. Thank you for your attention.
So I want to ask you how white Christian nationalism has personally affected your life. How big a threat is it to you and your country? And what do you fear most about white Christian nationalism?
Well, I think what we're describing is white Christian nationalism. Let me frame it that way.
Mhm.
It's not conservative Christianity. Obviously, it's not liberal Christianity either. What we're actually describing is an ideology that's not really a religion, but it looks like a religion and invokes language and symbols that have religious trapping. So I want to distinguish between genuine evangelicals, conservative Christians who are conservative. Believe it or not, when you get Jesus in your heart, you could turn out to be a Republican as well as a Democrat. You see, there's Jesus isn't about that. I mean, there's some values that come with that, but how you apply those in your life can vary. What we're describing and what the professor is really getting at is something that has been around a long time. Now, I think some innocent people are being fooled by it. Let me be clear about that. It's been around a long time. Let us not forget that chattel slavery in America was justified by pro-slavery Christian sounding voices.
Right.
Now, when you take those arguments and lay them alongside Jesus of Nazareth, let's just take Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount. I'm just picking one passage. Or let's just take Luke 4, or let's just take Matthew 25, or let's just take all four of the Gospels, lay the image of Jesus of Nazareth that you see there alongside the arguments that were used to maintain slavery, and you will see a wide gap that cannot be closed. The same is true with, if you look at the complex of white Christian nationalism, as an ideology, you lay it alongside Jesus of Nazareth, and we're not even talking about the same thing.
Right.
So that's why I think it's important to make a distinction, and that's what you've done between what is an ideology, which in America you have the right to hold, but I would argue you don't have the right to claim that it's Christian.
Right.
If you want to exclude folk, if you don't want to live what Jesus was real clear, you shall love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. On these two hang all the law and the prophets. That's it. I mean, he just said everything Moses was talking about. That's it. Now, does this sound like loving neighbor? No. If I love my neighbor, I want my neighbor to be as safe and secure as I am. I want my neighbor to have the same rights that I do. But once upon a time, and I remember my grandma talking about this from Eastern North Carolina, she talked about the hooded man. And when I was a little kid, I didn't know what grandma was talking about, the hooded man. I didn't know what she was talking about. She was talking about the Klan brother. They claim to be Christian. Now, was that Christianity? Really? Was that Christian? Lay that next to Jesus. And you begin to discover that we're not talking about a religious perspective at all. We actually are talking about an ideology that is cloaked in religious language and that uses religious symbols, but that actually isn't that at all. And I think part of our task, and these guys are better at it than I am, but part of our task is to help normal people, the sensible center, to be clear that, wait a minute, Christianity is about the way of Jesus of Nazareth. It is about the way of living love in our lives for real. And anything that's not that is not Christianity. It can be something else. I mean, America, you got a right to your opinion. Right or wrong, you got a right to it. But it's not that. And so I just think we're right on target. But I want to frame this as really not religion at all, but ideology.
In fact, it's the use and abuse of religion for ideology or for an ethnic culture or for a political agenda.
Yeah.
Right. I've often struck by how a lot of new white Christian nationalists weren't before practicing people of faith at all, but now they're white Christian nationalists. So Amanda, you have studied this as much as anybody. Your organization, in fact, you lead a group called Christians Against Christian Nationalism. I love that title. I want to ask you, is white Christian nationalism a bigger threat to our democracy or to the churches, or both? And is it, as Bishop Curry was suggesting, mainly a political movement or a religious movement, or both?
Well, I'm going to add another threat. it's a huge threat. I think I agree with you that it's the biggest threat to our democracy today. I think it's a huge threat to a faithful Christian life and to a flourishing Christianity in this country. And I think it's the single biggest threat to religious freedom for all that we face in America today. Because Christian nationalism as a political ideology and a cultural framework creates second-class citizens for everyone who's not Christian. Right. In their view. And so I think we can boil down every threat to religious freedom into that foundational value that that can unite us as Americans. You know, Christianity cannot and does not unite us as Americans, but what can unite us as Americans is this foundational value that our belonging in American culture and society will never be premised on what we believe or how we practice or how we identify religiously, or even if we identify as a religious person. Right. So I think we have to be very clear that these are threats to all of these things that we hold dear as Americans, as Christians, and as people who value religious freedom. I do think that it is primarily a political movement, and I agree that we have to distinguish it from Christianity. And I think based on just what you were saying about how complicit the church was in slavery, in segregation, in lynchings, in all of those things that came, that we have to acknowledge that American Christianity has been compromised by Christian nationalism for centuries. And so I would love to be able to completely separate the two and say that they have nothing to do with each other. And I think we cannot do that. And that's one of the things we are trying to do at Christians Against Christian Nationalism, is ask individual Christians and congregations to be very self-critical and to examine their own theologies and religious practices and see how much has Christian nationalism impacted my understanding of Christianity. Because if we don't get right with our own theologies and our own practice first, we won't be able to be the kind of witness we need to the rest of the world to dismantle Christian nationalism.
So if you could, around your tables, just discuss this topic, please. What are your comments, reactions, questions to what you've learned about Christian nationalism? I'll be doing the breakouts for the Zoom people, and it'll be about 8 or 9 minutes. Thank you.
We go forward now in a better way.
You know, I do think, I think on the one hand, it's always important whenever any form of exclusion. I'm hedging from the word bigotry because that's a little bit narrowly focused, but anything that excludes other folk, anything that puts other folk down, even implicitly, anything like that. People of decency and goodwill, whether they're Christian, Jews, Muslim, whatever they are, people of decency and goodwill must stand up and must name it. Silence is complicity. And silence creates a context in which something like that can grow. And when something like that can grow and is allowed to grow, it is like kudzu. I mean, y'all don't have kudzu up north, but anybody know about kudzu? I mean, man, you got to get a goat to take care of kudzu. That's about the only thing that'll stop it. I mean, and it just starts spreading. I mean, just starts spreading. So it has to be, you've got to confront, name it. When a synagogue is assaulted, Christians, Muslims, people of goodwill must stand up and say, this is not the way we want to be. When, and on, I can just go down the list. When LGBTQ folk are attacked, when trans folk are attacked, people of decency and goodwill, no matter what your political, must stand up and speak up. Silence creates an atmosphere for the negative to grow. It really does. So I think that's one thing. I think that we have to have ecumenical, interfaith, bipartisan, multiracial, multicultural, multi-religious coalitions of people who just want to stand up for human kindness and decency. So we got to do that. On the other hand, I do think there does have to be the kind of education is a weak word, but the kind of education that brings this conversation to the public to awareness,
Right.
that there is a counter narrative. There actually is a way of being Christian that is not exclusive, that is not about putting folk down, that you may vote your way and I may vote my way based on our values and our own discernment, that there is that kind, but that kind of Christianity. See, that's why I think reclaiming Jesus was significant, because sometimes you hear folks saying this is Christianity and they ain't saying nothing about Jesus. Now, I mean, you got to get real at some point and say, hold on, let's talk about the brother. He's supposed to be the Lord. Let's let him be the Lord. And so claiming and reclaiming that and just lifting up, we talked about the power of the text.
Yeah.
Lift up the text of the New Testament, specifically the 4 Gospels. But let Jesus speak. Remember that thing, let your fingers do the walking through the yellow pages years ago? Somebody just walk through the text a little bit and let Jesus talk.
Mhm.
And then let's lay Jesus aside, anything that claims to be Christian. And if it doesn't match up, then we say, well, that's not Christianity. It may be your opinion. You got a right to your opinion in this country. And I think that kind of education of just normal people. When I say normal, I don't mean anybody's abnormal, but just the kind of the normal folk who go to church, who maybe, look, I'm the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church. I know full well there are Republicans and Democrats in the Episcopal Church. I don't even need a survey to find that out. I know that. But I'm here to tell you, sensible, good, decent people who are really just trying to be Christian.
Right.
When they see it, they'll say, I thought that's what it was, but I beginning to hear some other things that seem like a different narrative.
Mhm.
Help them, that kind of education, the kind of thing you're doing and the kind of thing you're doing. We need more of that. And people like me and ordinary clergy, normal clergy in congregations to begin to re-educate ourselves to this Jesus of Nazareth and his way of love as God's way of life. And when we do that, then we can begin to discern, like the New Testament says in 1 John, test the spirits to see whether they be of God or not.
So a good story beats a good argument.
Every
So
day.
if we just argue about this forever, we're going to be stuck in those little binary categories.
Mhm.
So what's the story that gets us out of those categories? Yeah. So Amanda, you have warned there's been a dramatic uptick in violent acts inspired by white Christian nationalism, which has been more and more openly embraced. Now we see people with T-shirts, even members of Congress with T-shirts. I'm a white Christian nationalist, becoming a T-shirt movement as well, right? So these are threats. They are political threats. They are violent threats. Tell us what you see going on around this during these midterm elections and that whole conversation, campaigns. I've been reading about this so-called Reawaken America tour. People are being baptized, almost like political baptisms, which we quite haven't seen before. The Washington Post calls this a traveling carnival of misinformation that merges entertainment, politics, and theology.
Mhm.
So what do you see going on, particularly around this whole midterm election time?
Yeah. And before I hit the midterms, you bring up violence, and I have to say that tomorrow is a really somber anniversary. It's the 4-year anniversary of what remains the deadliest attack on Jews in America ever, the shooting at Tree of Life Synagogue. And it was that event coming after other deadly events that really spurred us to action to create Christians Against Christian Nationalism. The fact that people were losing their lives when this ideology was in the hands of violent extremists,
Right.
which makes what we're seeing in the midterm elections so irresponsible, because we know what this can lead to. This is not just about electing certain candidates to office, but people's lives are on the line. This Reawaken America tour has been on the road now for almost a year. It first caught my attention last November when there was an event in San Antonio, Texas, where Michael Flynn said the quiet part out loud. He said, we're one nation under God. We should have one religion, one one nation under God, one religion under God. So we see what the aim is. This isn't just about repeating lines of civil religion. This is about leading to a theocracy, about one version of Christianity being taken over by the government. And so we've seen this kind of, extremist rhetoric combined with misinformation, election lies, COVID lies, and put all in these huge arenas and often in houses of worship. Right. And it really is incredibly irresponsible to be exploiting this as a political strategy. And I think we are at a point that I fear that Christian nationalism is going to be normalized. And I think the only thing that can stop it is for normal people, to stand up and to say, this is not who we are. This is not who we want to be, either as Americans or for those of us who are Christians as Christians, and to do something about it. And it would be great to have some political leadership doing this as well. What's so alarming is when you have someone like a Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, the Republican Party should be the party of Christian nationalism. We didn't have leaders from the Republican Party saying, no, we shouldn't, right? And so then when we do have silence as complicity, then we have the danger of that overtaking. So, I think with all we will have to see whether these candidates who are espousing Christian nationalism actually prevail. That's incredibly alarming, because what could they do once they're in office? But just the use of the political rhetoric is dangerous and alarming as well.
So this is the next question. And I think when I was sharing the handouts, there's some Bible texts for you to use to kind of remind you of who Jesus was, what his stories were. And there's a resource list you're going to get at the end. And the first thing I put on that list was the New Testament and the Gospels in particular. So we'll give you some time. Zoom people will be broken out. So hopefully you can find some of those copies of the Bible text to help you with this conversation. You might know your own stories from the Bible. That's fine as well.
Time is up. We've got the Zoomers back online. There'll be a third segment here. And the focus here would be, what concrete examples do you see of God's love? So with that in mind, we'll start the third video. Thank you.
Sam, I was struck, you called white Christian nationalism the San Andreas fault of American politics. And you end your book, Flag and the Cross, must read again, with a warning. You write that January 6th is not the end. We could see another violent power grab, larger and more violent than the first, which could bury American democracy for at least a generation. So do you think another event like that could be on the horizon, or something even more successful?
I think to the extent that political leaders are comfortable using that kind of divisive, reactionary rhetoric, this us versus them, that we are no longer Americans who share common values, but we are. And in fact, we're actually seeing something like this. A political scientist named Paul Jupe, who's done some phenomenal work. He's doing some work on Christian nationalism right now, and he's looked at how Christian nationalism corresponds to things like acceptance of violence against political violence. And he found that when Christian nationalism is combined with things like apocalyptic language and belief, a belief that we as a world, as culture, as a nation are headed towards some kind of apocalyptic Armageddon-like battle between good and evil, that those two things combined together contribute to the acceptance of political violence, which makes complete sense, because on the Christian nationalism side, you've got this idea that something has been taken from you wrongly. And on the other side, you've got this idea that the stakes are so high that this is not just about Democrats versus Republicans. It's not about who won the latest election cycle and how'd you do in the midterms. It is literally God versus Satan, angels versus demons. And that's the kind of rhetoric we're seeing. So the Reawaken America tour, and other speakers like Roger Stone. Roger Stone has gone on record several times in public speeches to say that this is not about Democrats and Republicans. This is about angels and demons. This is about if we lose, we plunge the nation to 1,000 years of darkness. Now, think about you sitting in the pews and you sitting and listening to that kind of rhetoric. What are the links to which you would go to prevent America from doing that? I mean, of course, that would stoke that kind of partisan violence. So I think to the extent that political actors are comfortable using that kind of rhetoric and language to divide, to up the stakes, and to say that this isn't just about, political victories, this is actually some kind of a religious or God loses if we lose. Of course, I mean, I think you're setting yourself up for the kinds of conditions. Will it necessarily result in violence? I think it's a combination of conditions that leads to that. But I think you are certainly setting the ideological table for that to happen.
So we've talked about some very tough things tonight. This isn't just our topic for this month. Next month, we'll move on to the next. This is with us. It's deep in us. So, but I want to end on a bit of hope here. Given all this, I'd like each of you to quickly offer some reasons why you think white Christian nationalism can be defeated. Each of you, give me some hope here about what we could, because out there, I know a lot of you are not thinking, well, that's an interesting evening I went to.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go home and watch. I've got a couple shows to watch at home. So, no, this is, you're thinking, what do I do? What do we do? What do we say? What do we do? How do we act? What do we do differently? So give us, not that we have all the answers here, but each of you, give us just a quick sense of a bit of hope about how we can defeat this.
Well, I think we're starting in the right place by having a conversation about it, because Christian nationalism, as we pointed out, has been with us for centuries. And what has allowed it to be so persistent and pervasive is avoidance, is not tackling it, not getting to the foundation, the myth of America as a Christian nation. That's something that we haven't explicitly talked about tonight, but that's what all of Christian nationalism rests on, this false history of the United States. So what I'm seeing, and this is a place for hope and opportunity, I'll say, from more and more people coming out as Christian nationalists, is at least they're being open about what they are. And we can have a conversation instead of running away from that title. We can't have a conversation about it at that point. And because when that happened, we saw media interest in this topic skyrocket. We've been working on this for years. We've had very few people in the media covering this, in mainstream media covering Christian nationalism. Suddenly it's in the papers, it's on TV all the time. That is a good thing, because we are actually going to be getting people involved. The other sign of hope I have is, the more I talk about being a Christian against Christian nationalism, I get comments like it's always a dangerous thing to read the comments, online, but in this case, it was a sign of hope. Because most of the comments were, finally, I'm a Christian and these people don't speak for me. And I'm so glad that you're out there in the public square. Me too, me too. So we need more of that to then engender someone to actually then be a public advocate as a voice for Jesus in the public square and a voice against Christian nationalism.
So Bishop Curry, your job is to bring hope. That's what you do.
Is what?
Bring hope.
Bring hope. Oh.
Yeah, there you go. So bring us some hope here.
I'm saying amen to what she just said. Yeah, I've read St. Augustine, and I know about I've read Calvin. I know about human depravity. I know about the depths of sin and all the vicissitudes. I know all that stuff. And I've seen it.
Yeah.
But I also know what I believe. And I don't believe it on the evidence of anything that Michael Curry has. But I believe that Jesus was killed by an empire for doing good. And I believe he rose from the dead. Now, if I didn't believe that, then I'm not sure what I would, I don't know how I'd navigate it, but I believe that. And I believe, like I heard Desmond Tutu once say, he said it a lot, that because I believe that, I believe that good will triumph over evil and that love will win over hate. But it will not happen, as Dr. King said, on wheels of inevitability.
Mhm.
It will happen by good people, who want to be good, even if we're not, coming together. And I'm looking at Mary Ann Buddy, the Bishop of Washington, and one time, I don't know if she remembers this, she talked about mobilized love. That if we would mobilize love, and that we can, then there is nothing. There is no power, and I'm not talking about people now, no power of destruction, of hatred, of violence, of bigotry that can stop that.
Here's our final question. What are some concrete examples of where you see the love of God expressed? This is kind of an easy one, but go for it anyway, okay? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your kind attention. I just have a couple other remarks before Grace takes over. I'd like to do a shout out. I guess that's a kid thing that they do. A shout out to Laura Hanna at Hennepin Avenue Methodist Church. They conducted a workshop much like this back in May that I attended, and was kind of the impetus for us to move forward boldly. Couple other thank yous is, you can't see Heather back here, but she's back here. There she is. She's the queen of the video and soundboard. And as you, perhaps, and Kyle is at home in bed with COVID with his wife. She's, well, maybe not in bed with his wife, but she's, how do I get out of this? Okay. Anyway.
We have it recorded. It's fine.
He was very instrumental. I'm sure some of you got some emails from him, and Bob Parrott was essential to this operation as well. So thank you to those folks. And Grace?
Just a couple more short things. First of all, really make sure you signed up on the sign-up sheet, because if we have some handouts over here, we had 40 copies and there's 60 people in the room. So if you didn't get a handout that you want, there should be some over there. And there's something over here that nobody has yet. It's the resource list. So if you want that, again, if you've done the sign-up sheet, we're going to send all the handouts to anybody that gives us their email. And somebody was asking again what this tour was that was mentioned a couple of times. It's called Reawaken American Tour. And Google it or watch one of them. It's pretty scary. So with that, I guess that is it. Oh, next week is going to be at 11:30, a gathering time. There's going to be a light lunch, and at 12 noon, Bishop up in the sanctuary. I was going to get to that. I got a lot of prompts. What do they call them? Backseat drivers, whatever. It will be in the sanctuary instead of down here. Because there's not a service going on. So if you're going to the later service, it'll be after that service. At 12 noon, the bishop's going to be on Zoom. We have prepared a few questions for her, but she will also take in the chat from the Zoom or in person. We'll have some mics up there. So if there's something really pressing you want to ask the bishop, you can send it again. Kyle is probably the best one to send it to. It's just basically kyle@nativitychurch.org, or it's the bishop of the entire Lutheran Church. It's similar to the status of Bishop Curry, who is the bishop of all the Episcopals. It's recorded, and it's going to take, I would say, maybe a week let's say a week, because that's, that's what they say. It'll be 2 or 3 days possibly, but in a week, it'll be posted. And I'm sure they'll make announcements during the service. If you haven't noticed, the pastors have been making announcements about this series. They are very concerned about it, and they don't really know for sure what to do about it. So they're, they're trying, as Bishop Curry has said, just talk about Jesus. Just talk about Jesus and what he did and what he stood for, and put it alongside all the other noise that's going on. So with that, we are done. Thank you for coming. And the handouts are over here, and the ones on Zoom will get it by email.